Hi, I'm Lindsay Lee Wallace, and this is The Nose, the pop culture roundtable of the Colin McEnroe Show. I'd tell you that I'll be sitting in for Colin this week, but since the Great Joining made us all one collective consciousness, really, Colin and I are both hosting The Nose. We're all hosting The Nose. You're hosting The Nose. Congratulations. Or at least that's what I'd say if we were part of the very polite hive mind featured in the new Apple TV show PLUR1BUS, which we'll be talking about on this week's show. And after that, we'll talk about Orwell, 2 + 2 = 5, an utterly un-Orwellian documentary using George Orwell's writing alongside historical and recent footage to highlight the continued relevance of his anti-fascist political philosophy today. Join us right after the news, or don't. Your life is your own. Hello, I'm Lindsay Lee Wallace in for Colin, and this is The Nose, our pop culture roundtable. I'm joined this week by Shawn Murray, a stand-up comedian and writer and the host of the Fantasy Filmballpodcast, and Mercy Quaye, the founder and president of the Narrative Project, and Bill Usman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. Later in the show, we'll look at the new documentary Orwell, 2 + 2 = 5, and then we'll do some endorsements. But first, PLUR1BUS is a new science fiction TV series that's either post-apocalyptic or utopian, depending on how you feel about feeling everything that everyone else feels. It's created by Vince Gilligan, who also created Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, among other things, and wrote and directed extensively for The X-Files, which inspired my Halloween costume last year. Apple TV's logline for PLUR1BUS reads, "The most miserable person on Earth must save the world from happiness." I don't really feel like that explains what's going on in this show, but this clip might. I should say that this is kind of a big episode 1 spoiler, but also that there would be no way to talk about the show without spoiling this particular stuff. You're about to hear Rhea Seehorn. She played Kim Wexler on Better Call Saul in PLUR1BUS. She's Carol Sturka, a curmudgeonly romance writer who's basically just experienced the end of the world. And now she's on the phone with a man that she's watching on her TV, and he's addressing her directly from the podium of the White House press briefing room. This is A1.
Are there any questions you might have for us, Carol? Anything at all?
Yeah, sure. I guess to start with, what the is happening?
Well, basically...
It's an alien invasion, right? I mean, obviously, it's an alien invasion.
Actually, no. We are, however, beneficiaries of extraterrestrial technology. 14 months ago, astronomers discovered a radio signal from 600 light years away. There's no telling how long it's been repeating, maybe throughout all of human existence. This signal, it's made up of 4 tones. It's a recipe, it turns out, for a nucleotide sequence, RNA. It is not a living thing, per se. It is more akin to a virus, though it's not that exactly either. It's kind of a psychic glue capable of binding us all together.
So if you're not aliens... Who am I talking to right now? Who are you?
This particular individual, this is Davis Taffler, Undersecretary of Agriculture for Farm Production and Conservation. But you are currently talking to every person on Earth, including Davis Taffler. We're all one.
How does that work?
We don't know exactly. It just does.
So... Mercy, I heard through our shared hive mind, of which we are both a part, of which we are all a part, that you've already watched all of the currently available episodes of PLUR1BUS twice.
Yeah.
So please tell me what you thought and what made you queue up the replay.
Well, because I wanted to show other people it.
Oh, yeah.
No, but I think what's interesting, one, I'll say that being invited to this particular show by Jonathan McNichol felt like an expression of community love for me, right? I go in cold. I like to watch what's assigned pretty cold. I don't want to consume anything else, any other critique on it. I just want to dive in. And so I did exactly that. And I was like, all right, we're starting off with astronomers. I'm digging this. This is my bag. This is my literal bag. And what I find interesting about the piece is it seamlessly merges a lot of my favorite topics of discussion, issue matter, right? Like astrophysics and astronomy, and then race, particularly this idea that Carol, the main character here, is unable to adapt to what she is interacting with. You know, the Apple line, the Apple description, the most miserable person on earth has to save the world from happiness. You know, shout out to my best friends who are white women. Some of my best friends are white women. But there are, I think, there's this real clear stereotype that reigns true for this character. No matter what she interacts with, whatever she is engaging with, she always centers herself in that moment. There's a hive mind, and no one's died I think, you know, what was it, the first 30 days, there weren't any injuries, and there were no deaths until her single expression of rage. And I won't talk about how many people she killed in that, but like her expression of rage, right? And I think that there's this clear, for me, analog, this you know, I don't know, simile for the way white women show up in social spaces and how everyone around them has to cater to the whims of their emotions.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's definitely, she is so unable to understand the idea that everyone else doesn't agree with her about what is going on and about the fact that it needs to be fixed. There's this like incredible scene where she's standing in front of the U.S. presidential seal saying like, it is our responsibility to make the world right, as I'm sure countless people have stood in front of exactly that imagery and said before.
That exact thing, yeah.
Yeah. But she's a woman, so it's actually really meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, and in certain ways, it's interesting to see. But I also, you know, the forgiveness that I do give her as a character is, while there are other people who weren't impacted by the alien technology that created the hive mind, and so they are not a part of it. While there are other people like that in the world, they all had friends or family turn, and so they got to experience the turn in a way that made them have an affinity for it. Carol didn't get that experience, so she's experiencing this hive mind very alone.
Yeah. Bill, I wanna hear what you think about the fact that out of everyone, Carol's the only person who is, she's navigating the hive mind entirely alone. And you could say that that's the result of her curmudgeonly nature. Maybe she's more isolated for that reason. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about how that affects her understanding of it, and also sort of the political message of the show?
There are the show tells us that there are a handful of people throughout the world who are immune to this in some ways, and they don't know why, and they want to be exploring this because eventually they want to bring them into the hive. But Carol is really the one that we find out the most about, at least in terms of the episodes that have been released so far. There is more to come. And, you know, I think she's actually a really interesting character. And I think the politics of the show revolve around whether you're on Carol's side or not.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I first watched it, and I told you all this, I was feeling a little skeptical about it as just a real kind of like libertarian text, because it very much on the surface presents the hive mind as this caricature of communism, or this caricature of socialism, where, you know, the right-wing caricature is that it deprives us of all of our individuality and just brings us into, you know, sort of this cult. And it very much, I think, is in the tradition of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was a Red Scare, Cold War allegory about that. But I have to give you credit, Lindsay. In some of the conversations we had, you made me start to rethink that a little bit, and to rethink it in terms of, well, is it actually doing is it critiquing that whole sort of trope? And is it critiquing it by the way Carol is represented? Because Carol is represented as a Karen, as Mercy pointed out. I don't want to steal that. And so if you accept what's happening solely through her eyes, it can seem very much like a libertarian kind of, anti-collectivist, anti-communal message. But once you start to realize that it's not necessarily on Carol's side, then you have to rethink that a little bit.
I mean, the show is critical of Karen. I think you need a beat to recognize that. But it's critical of Karen. And I'm sorry, Carol. And I do think it was McPants that pointed that out.
That's right.
The phonic similarity
McPants.
between Karen and Carol. And I do think that Gilligan's decision to make it Carol and not Karen, you get that phonic simile, but without it being too on the nose.
And also her individuality is so important to her. She's a very specific iteration of a curmudgeonly white lesbian who believes that she could never do anything to hurt anybody. She just wants her own personal grocery store.
She's still so entitled,
incredible.
And, if I don't have 15 different kinds of hummus, then life is not worth living.
And that's also true for me.
That's not fair, though, because her problem was there was no hummus in the store.
Yeah.
And then she employed,
True.
did not employ, and then she asked...
But
I don't know.
But that's my issue with this. So this is my pushback on the read of I think Carol is a Karen, right? I think Carol is a Karen, right? But I don't think she's wrong. I don't think she's wrong to say what, because this might be something that's fleshed out later in the show, but we have no real sense of what it's like to be a part of the hive mind. In fact, the most we see of them is being utilized as slaves to work to get other people a part of the hive mind. Anytime they want to convince Carol to come, hey, you want to be a part of us? Hey, we're gonna have a staff on this airplane. We're gonna have people come stock this supermarket. What's their life like? Is it better? Because I don't think she's wrong. If you put yourself in her shoes, the whole world just changed tomorrow and everyone's a part of this hive. I don't think everyone's going to just jump and say yeah, I'm down for that. You know what I mean? I think because she sucks as a person, it's easy to disagree with her. But I think I would, if I put myself in, I'm I don't know if I'm trying to be down with this alien weirdo, because it doesn't, I don't have a sense that it is better yet. Yes, there's less violence. That's all great. But I like to be able to do, It's tough because you get into that socialism, communism argument about they portray it as, right wing portrayal of it is there's no individuality, right? But there literally is no individuality within the hive mind as we see it. It just seems like they're all just what do they do? What do they do?
They really are a virus. I mean, that's what they are, right?
And they say they have a biological imperative to perpetuate themselves.
There's this thing where they even are licking donuts at the beginning to try to infect everybody else, right?
Ariana Grande style.
But this is what actually makes it a complicated...
You don't know about when she did that?
Oh, let's not get into it. It's she got caught licking a donut at a donut shop.
That totally swerved
Ariana
me.
Grande is trying to start a hive mind. Think about that when you see Wicked. Think about that when you see Wicked.
But all of this is what actually makes it a pretty complicated text to try to kind of figure out. At least not yet, they haven't given away how they want us to be reacting to this. It's in cultural studies, we would call this an open text rather than a closed one, which, the next thing we're going to talk about today is a closed text. I don't mean that as a criticism, but it's coming from a whole different perspective about, kind of saying this is how you should be thinking about this, where Pluribus leaves that a little bit more open, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also, so coming from also this sociological background and thinking a great deal about what happens when you have increased amounts of empathy for people. I believe Ezra Klein said this a couple of weeks ago on his show, and we've got our feelings about Ezra Klein as of late, right? but he said, something about connecting with genuinely connecting with people who are genuinely other people. This idea of you get to be yourself, and I have actual empathy for that person, and in a way where I can put down all of the layers that might stand between us, and I can understand your plight, I can understand your joys, and I can connect with you in a particular way. What would happen if we were all actually connected? Some of the things that we might see are things like a drastic reduction in crime. Right? We would see a drastic reduction in crime. We would see more common sense solutions to issues that have been politicized that don't need to be, like climate change, whether people can breathe clean air. You would be far more rational. You'd be far more logical. I think what we're seeing, Shawn, that you're pointing out that I think is real poignant and should be pointed out is like, these people feel very much at the whims and to some degree enslaved by the folks who are not in the hive mind. Now, there is something interesting there because we've only interacted with maybe 20 of them in earnest. Maybe 20 of them have lines. But the scene where Carol wants her grocery store and she makes the ask.
Hello,
What happened to my
Carol.
sprouts? Are you the Grinch who steals supermarkets?
So sorry. We're consolidating resources to centralize useful items for distribution. Food, medicine, anything helpful from stores or businesses or what used to be private homes. It's just more efficient.
Fine. I get it.
Is there something specific you need? We can deliver to you anytime, anywhere.
I am not going to call you every time I need something. I don't want you waiting on me. I am a very independent person, okay? I always have been. I fend for myself. I just want my sprouts back.
Absolutely. Will do.
Okay. Great. So, what? Can we say Friday, maybe? I just need a rough estimate of when I should come back.
We'll be there in a moment.
And everyone comes back to fill in the grocery store. I think it's a bit much. Don't fill in the entire grocery store. It's not quite logical.
She only needs like 3 kinds of hummus.
At least, right? And so my at most rather, I think until that scene, the assumption that I had here is, okay, these people must be experiencing, the non-hivers, if you will, must be experiencing an existence that is really lonely and feels very isolating. And so how can we give them what they need? Because we're good. And we're going to be good.
It's really significant that her partner has been lost to her as part of this.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right, Mercy. Every time you see her, she's alone. I mean, even if she's in the presence of sort of like this main hiver that's been attached to her, you know, they're on a plane and she's sitting all by herself.
Yep.
She's in her home all by herself. And even though she's annoying, you can't help but kind of feel bad for her and empathize with her loneliness.
Absolutely.
She's grieving, which is also something that, like, if you think about, everyone is connected now in the grief of every amount of grief anyone has ever felt, ostensibly, except for these people who aren't part of it, Carol and the other people. But even they still, you see, have members of their families that, from their perspective, they still seem to feel are their family members and not just representatives of the hive mind, which is also interesting because, you know, there's a scene where, I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's a scene where Carol is talking to this woman, Lakshmi, who's like, well, my son is still my son. And then Carol is, you know, goading him into revealing that he has all this knowledge that he shouldn't as a little boy. And Lakshmi is horrified by that. She doesn't want to think about that. So, like, the idea of whether or not individuality is still important and the idea of what you've lost is, you know, Carol is so upset because she can't ignore the death of her wife, whereas some of these other people you might believe are not as upset because they don't believe or they haven't reckoned with the idea that they've lost people here. And also, not to make a hard cut connection, but I feel like it's there, is that something it reminded me a lot of. There's, you know, Carol has this reticence to have Helen, her dead partner, reference to her, even though the hive mind has Helen's knowledge, because she wants that to be hers. And she lost this person. And something it reminded me of is something the hive mind reminded me of in general is, you know, the idea of, like, if we have generative AI that's been fed all of everything ever produced that you can give, you know, the memories of your dead loved ones to, it can help you talk to them. But there's a revulsion to that kind of thing, I think, as well, because you don't want something that is yours, your private grief or just your private intimacy, to belong to everybody. And that's a complex thing about like who owns another person, especially after they've died, those memories. Like what is their worth, I guess? And I think, I'm not really asking a specific question, but as a representation of that generative AI mind, like how does the show function that way?
I think it's such a fair and poignant comparison and, really a point to elevate because the thing, well, in part, I think I grapple with it, right? Because I think that ultimately, we're talking about the combination, the loss of individuality worth the gain of like equality or equity or any of these other things. Now, if you make that decision, I think is the gain of equity, equality, or whatever else worth the loss of innocence? And that's what actually we see in that moment with Lakshmi and her kid. So it's the recognition that he's lost his innocence. He's 10 years old, right? We can insert all of the ideas around Tiger Mom and why she's really proud of that. And that was a really particular way to depict these characters. But the loss of innocence was, I think, what she was mourning in that moment and repulsed by.
Yeah, and what it is to be a mother is gone if the person you're shepherding in the world has the knowledge of every other person.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, what even is a child at that point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think until we get more answers, it's just a lot of questions. I don't think it's bad because of it, but I just think there's so much to figure out about what it all means, because it's all up in the air as far as, like, the sociological implications of it, because it's like, what is freedom at this point? You know what I mean? Like, does freedom exist? And it's I think Carol says it, and if she doesn't say it, this is a thought that I had. It's just kind of like, of course you're selling me on this because it's your job to sell me on this. Like,
yeah,
just because you're telling me it's better, I'm not sure it's better, because I was thinking of this in terms of AI overall as like, they're pushing AI, corporations are pushing AI super hard of late, right? Last few years. Whether it's generative AI, whether it's like AI as a technological solution for your business, whatever. And the whole pitch is it's going to make your life easier but it's like, when have corporations ever wanted to make my life easier?
Yeah.
Like when have you ever been incentivized to make my life easier? And even when they do want to make your life easier, there's always something on the back end of it that you find out, like, oh, yeah, we made your life easier so we could steal your data and make your life worse in a few years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, again, until we get certain answers, I'm kind of just like, I would just be similar to Carol. I would just be a little leery of, like, what is actually happening here? Because why would this alien civilization just want to make everything
just make
great?
Things nice for us for no reason?
And maybe that's just
because we're not killing each other.
No, what I'm saying is,
like,
that's the natural human thing. Not natural human thing, but like to be like, I don't trust this thing because I don't understand it, right? But oftentimes, I think it's valuable, even if you can be trusting and still have questions.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think as human beings, we can't understand the concept of like, I just want to help you guys, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, people do that, but like, we always kind of have this sort of like pushback on like, no, there's something behind that.
And
you know?
That's the other
motive.
shoe has yet to drop, right? Because we haven't gone to the conclusion of this series or even of the first season. There is a sense that there's something looming here.
It's gotta be.
I mean, we don't really know what the hive experience is like, but like if someone spoils a show for me, actually, I like spoilers because there's nothing that you can do that changes how the writers and the director decided to tell that story. That's can't, right? Like, now there is something in the hive experience that I'm interested in is like, do I know everything you know, or have I seen everything you see? Because that's a different experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because the emotional impact of, like, witnessing something horrible is different from knowing that something horrible happened.
Exactly.
Which is also very relevant to Orwell.
Here we go.
Okay, now we have to take a quick break. Stay right where you are for 90 seconds.
such a dreamer to put the world to rights. I stay home forever, but two and two always makes a five.
You're listening to The Colin McEnroe Show. I'm Lindsay Lee Wallace, in for Colin. This is The Nose, our pop culture roundtable. I'm with Shawn Murray, a stand-up comedian, writer, and the host of the Fantasy Filmball podcast, Mercy Quaye, founder and president of The Narrative Project, and Bill Usman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. Orwell, 2 + 2 = 5, is the newest documentary that is produced, written, and directed by Raoul Peck, who is probably best known for I Am Not Your Negro about James Baldwin, which was nominated for the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature in 2018. According to distributor Neon, in Orwell, Raoul Peck interweaves clips, readings from Orwell's diary, cinematic references, and modern-day footage to craft not only a portrait of the writer, but a fresh take on how prophetic his work has become. To try and illustrate that as best we can, only with sound, here's a bit of the movie. You'll hear Damian Lewis here as the voice of George Orwell. Here's B1.
Since, in practice, no one is infallible, it is frequently necessary to rearrange past events in order to show that this or that mistake was not made, or that this or that imaginary triumph actually happened.
The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela.
You can tell he hasn't done anything wrong just by his demeanor. I mean, he would be trying to hide things.
Already, there are countless people who think it's scandalous to falsify a scientific textbook, but would see nothing wrong in falsifying a historical fact.
Trump is blocking witnesses.
I don't care.
So I guess, Shawn, you went last in the first segment, so why don't you start us off with your thoughts about Orwell?
I thought it was like entrancing, like the editing and the filmmaking on display is very just. It reminds me of what's it called, Koyaanisqatsi, that like style of like just matching up images and like juxtaposing things. I think it was just fascinating.
Koyaanisqatsi, I think. I've just been told by Jonathan over
there
my headphones.
Go.
Yep.
I was pretty close. But I thought it was fascinating. This is something we were talking about off mic. Is like oftentimes the popular conception of an artist is like that they just have ideas and then their politics and their ethos just kind of bleeds out of their creation, right? It's like they just started writing a novel and it just so happened because they were thinking about socialism or whatever that there's a socialist theme in there. I like how
I slipped and I spilled my socialism on my novel.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas Orwell was like explicit about how he's like, oh, I started with the idea of totalitarianism or democratic socialism before I even thought of it as a piece of art. Like I think it's one of the first quotes in the documentary is him saying like, when I sit down to write a novel, I'm not thinking about art. I'm thinking about like the ideas I have. And I think oftentimes that is portrayed as like, if you start with the idea, like the themes first, then the project and the end result will be too ham-fisted or like there's no art to it. And I feel like Orwell's the perfect example of like, no, you can actually start that way and it still turn out these classic and sort of, I don't want to say eternal, but like these pieces of art that are like, will be applicable for, unfortunately, for very, very, very many years to come.
Unless we find the astronomical recipe to become a hive mind.
Which would fix everything. But yeah, I mean, Mercy, what do you, in terms of, Orwell setting out with a very specific goal, how do you see the very specific goal of this documentary? Or how do you see, how it comes across, whether or not that may have been the goal?
I mean, so we consistently see artists warning us about ourselves throughout time. I think Orwell is a really good example of like, here is what happens if we continue on this path. Another author who has in recent years felt prophetic is an Octavia Butler. We've talked about this. Parable of the Sower feels very timely, feels prophetic. It feels like she knew something. Certainly before 1984, folks did not think, right? Like Orwell was, I'll say this in the way that the kids in my high school would say, or like the kids now would say, just spitting straight facts. But I think the issue is, history repeats itself. I think the moral that we'd like to think that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. We'd like to think that, but the reality is it kind of doesn't. It kind of takes work. It requires us to do something, and it requires us to break gravity. And that's why it's so hard, because if we do not break gravity as human beings, we are propelled towards the individualism. I actually think that capitalism is somewhat of an instinct. I think it takes some work for us to gather in ways that are supportive to community. What's interesting about these two things, I'm going to try to say this in the way that I said it in email, but right, like the interesting juxtaposition about these two pieces for me is one feels very much like a metaphor. PLUR1BUS is a metaphor, right? Like what happens when populations fall into collectives? What happens when collectives fall into obedience, right? And for me, I think that the analogy in PLUR1BUS is exactly that. Like, look what could happen. Orwell is this closed piece, to your point, Bill, of like, no, actually, let's look back at what did happen and look at now what is happening. At no point does the director allow us to think of this piece as historical fiction, or even a historical piece that we have graduated from, right? We haven't graduated. He intertwines pop culture and moments in our social political context as of right now to remind us, no, we are actually here.
Absolutely. And Bill, how do you feel like that's part of sort of Raoul Peck's whole shtick as a filmmaker?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's his thing. I'm a big fan of Raoul Peck's films. You'll hear that when we get to our endorsements. That's what I'm going to stick with today. So as a fan of Orwell and Peck, I was very, very excited about this. You do have to be willing as a viewer to give yourself over to the Peck style. This is not going to be a linear, naturalistic story of George Orwell was born here, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then he went over here, and then he died. He's going to shift us around through time. He's going to shift us around through space. He's going to go into the future, Orwell's future, which is our present. He's going to use a collage kind of approach where, as Mercy said, he's bringing in pop culture, films, music, but also historical footage. And I think it's a very powerful way to make the point that Mercy was saying, that we are still in the thick of this. Like, we haven't moved beyond the dystopia that Orwell imagined in 1984. It's played itself out, and it continues to play itself out. It's structured with these three things that come up in 1984, these three slogans of the party. War is peace, ignorance is strength, and freedom is slavery. And it builds itself based in those three structures, and it intertwines back and forth between them. But if you think about that, like we are living with that right now. You think about the way J.D. Vance has said professors are the enemy, or Trump has said, I love the poorly educated. Ignorance is strength. And all of this is playing out in our current time. And I think Peck does a masterful job of bringing that in, even as he's weaving this story of Orwell's life and what Orwell was always working in resistance against.
I definitely feel like that's true. And I think that, to all of the modern references, the tying of the historic context in which Orwell was writing to the things that are happening now is such an important part of it, because I feel like everyone wants to claim George Orwell. Everyone wants to describe something that they don't like as Orwellian. If you think that you are being told that your ideas are bad, then you are going to say, oh, I'm being censored, I'm being silenced. And people who want to say, like, we have to take the books that reference slavery out of the school library because they will make white children feel bad, then want to turn around and be like, oh, you want to tell me your pronouns? Like, it's just like 1984. And that's one of the reasons that I think
the
it's so
snowflake now.
exactly.
I mean, that's the embodiment of that upside down, inside out logic that Orwell was actually critiquing.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's why it's so important, because there's this idea that is pervasive throughout it, that like words have many meanings, war has many meanings, peace has many meanings, and by showing you exactly what Orwell was talking about, it's like it's saying, this is what this word means, this is what it is when authoritarianism is happening, this is the context that is being pushed back against, rather than, you can call anything Orwellian. You can't. It means something specific. It means, being told that there's a ceasefire in Gaza when there's not a ceasefire in Gaza.
Right. Calling everything Orwellian is Orwellian.
Mm-hmm. And this documentary is not Orwellian because it's specific about what it is to be Orwellian.
And for those of us in news and media, I think we have this certain goosebumps reaction to hearing newspeak, right? It's like, the ceasefire isn't a ceasefire. When even let's take one of the greatest social political issues of our time, abortion, right? Like the language around abortion is pro-choice, pro-life. The reality is like, what? Right? And pro-choice can easily and has easily been adopted by folks around anti-vax persuasions. It's like, so it means this here and it means this here. I think that the architects of the compartments that one has to build in your mind to keep all that safe are very well paid. Those architects are very well paid. And the issue is the human condition, we're kind of sheep, right? Like, tell us where to go, tell us what to think, tell us what to do, make it as easy as possible.
So we're back to pluribus now.
Exactly. It all comes back to
I would like overnight shipping on my hand grenade.
Right. I think
the sheep thing is like, you can't blame the state of the world on each individual. Like, you got to vote or whatever. But I think there is a level of like, I think so many people don't want to have to be involved in the political reality, the social reality. And it's like, I voted, that's enough. Or like, you know what I mean? They don't want to have to actually participate in society. And that's not what is the catalyst for things getting bad, but that's what allows it to get this bad, where it's like, well, when the fascists were taking over, you didn't want to have to do anything but, hey, I voted for Biden, I voted for Kamala. Wasn't that enough? You know what I mean? I feel like there's a certain level of like, you gotta actually have to be engaged and want to be a part of.
This is exactly what I mean when I say break gravity. I think the natural flow of the human condition is to go with the masses, or right, like to take the path of least resistance, right? That is what we do naturally, and so we have to break gravity. We have to go against that flow and actually do. There's a gerund, there's a doing that we are obligated to, and then in addition to that, to the point you were saying. I agree broadly. I don't think it's any one individual, but when masses of individuals decide to not do the thing, the system runs on itself now. Like it doesn't need attention by any of us because the system runs on our inaction. That's what fuels it.
You got to throw. You were supposed to throw to a clip when she says break
sorry.
gravity, and you're supposed to put defying gravity from Wicked.
I was trying to clue you up.
Trying to bring Ariana Grande.
What? Stop! Are you like you're licking the donuts for Ariana Grande now?
Are you a Grande hiver?
Grande said, "Why are you so obsessed with me?"
I've been paid by the Ariana Grande for President campaign.
I'm sure you have.
Bring
I
up her
believe
name
you
as
completely
many times as possible. But you know what's I'm glad you brought up the Martin Luther King quote, the moral arc of the universe is long, but bends towards justice, because I feel like I never agreed with that quote fully, because I also often think of every action has an equal and opposite reaction, where it's like, it's bending towards justice, and then the other side is bending it back the other, like, anytime something good, I reference this book constantly, The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, about the San Domingo Revolution, better known as the Haitian Revolution. And it's like, a lot of that book is talking about once the revolution happened, and it happened in many stages, it's like, well, then we started doing slavery again. Or like other bad stuff started happening in response to the good stuff. Like, it never just like a positive development in society is never the end of the story about that thing. You know what I mean? For example, abortion. Like, for all these years, we thought like, okay, abortion is legal, but they never codified Roe v. Wade, and now we're back to like, how do we get back there? You know what I mean? Because it's like it's not over, and that goes back to my point about like we got to participate in society. Like it doesn't just stop because like
right.
Roe v. Wade, we did it.
Mm-hmm. I want to connect what you're saying there back to what you said earlier, Yusman. It's just like in any moment now, I'll remember it.
If we were in a hive mind, you would already know.
I would already know. Wait, that's a question. Does your memory fail you in a hive mind?
Oh, I feel like you can't. Do you think you know which memories are yours and which memories are everyone else's?
Interesting. Is it hive mind plus limitless? Like you're accessing, you know what I mean? You're accessing all of the corners of your brain?
See, I feel like it can't fail you because if your memory is failing you, then like Lindsay would pick up. You know what I mean? Like I feel like how
is it uploaded to the cloud? And like I don't know where to find it, but like this person has been accessing
I feel like it's in the cloud because like same when they
like there's no such thing as Alzheimer's anymore because somebody somewhere remembers everything that you
gray matter deterioration in one's brain is still going to.
Well, actually, this is an interesting question also about. It's not an interesting question about Orwell, but it's relevant to Orwell in that one of the things that I feel like is pervasive throughout Orwell over and over again is the reference to the fact that he is very, very sick. He's basically chronically ill. Yeah. That's not like the language that probably would have been used at that time. And, you know, we're talking about, like, what does a hive mind do for, like, the sickest members of society or the most disabled members of society? And that's also a question about, like, in this context that Orwell is writing, he's referencing, you know, what it feels like to be very hungry, what it feels like to be very sick. And I feel like those are all states that are heavily exacerbated by the kind of authoritarian regime, the kind of fascist regime that he's writing against. So I guess, how did you guys feel like it impacted the story that was being told and the way that it was being juxtaposed to keep returning to him saying, you know, I'm writing now from the hospital. I haven't slept in days. They're giving me medicine. I feel like it added another layer that feels especially relevant right now, I guess, when healthcare has been this big, like, political football.
Well, one of, I think, the most admirable things about Orwell, and I think Peck does a good job of bringing this out, is that he was always on the side of the oppressed. He was always on the side of the victimized. He was always on the side of the persecuted, regardless of which political direction the persecution was coming from. He was as opposed to the Soviet Union as he was opposed to Nazi Germany. And so what that's done historically is it's allowed both sides to claim him. Mm-hmm. But if you actually read his own work or if you listen to his words in this documentary, he was always clear. At one point, he makes a statement that every word he's written is against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism. He was clear about that. And what he means by that is every word he's written is against the abuses of power and for creating as positive, warm, embracing, and nurturing a society as we can for everyone.
You heard it here on The Nose. That is the official definition of Orwellian. No one is allowed to claim it's anything other than that. Okay, now we have to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and do endorsements. We're back. This is The Nose. I'm Lindsay Lee Wallace in for Colin McEnroe. Before we get to endorsements, I want to say 2 quick thank yous. Thank you so much to Jonathan McNichol, who is the producer of the show and The Nose in general. And thanks to Colin for letting me commandeer the airwaves. Now we're going to do our endorsements. And Bill, you haven't started any of the segments yet, so you can start this one. What are yours?
Okay, well, I'm sticking with Raoul Peck, as I warned you all. The first one is, we've already referenced earlier in the show, his 2016 documentary based on James Baldwin's work, provocatively titled I Am Not Your Negro, which is actually a more mild version of what Baldwin had actually said in that moment. And there's some real consonance between this and the Orwell, because it does the same kind of thing where it uses Baldwin's own words to bring to light the centrality of his ideas to the American struggle. Uses a lot of pop culture, media clips, that sort of thing. So that's my first one. And then the second one, also by Raoul Peck, from 2021, a documentary mini-series called Exterminate All the Brutes, which was about the darkest things that have happened in world civilization. Colonization, genocide, imperialism, Nazism, white supremacy, and again, it skips around from era to era, but all in the service of making this larger argument about the many, many ways that humans have brutalized each other, abused power, and the need to always be vigilant against that.
Thank you so much. Mercy, what are your endorsements?
Yeah, I've got 3 pieces. First, I'll talk about, it is called Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy. It is a documentary produced on
I've used
Netflix.
that with students.
Yeah, so have I. It's excellent. Yeah. I think, our conversation about no one needs overnight shipping, right? I mean, this is exactly the fruit of this documentary. It is about a number of global corporations, Amazon, Adidas, and a few other ones, and how they have done everything they can to capitalize on your attention, right? And how that's effectively undercutting the health of our environment. Then I'll also talk about bringing AI back into the conversation. There is this book I think everyone should read or listen to if that's of your variety. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. It's by Eliezer Yudkowsky, and he's really a pioneer in the AI space, and it's really about, this line from Jurassic Park, I think, the scientists never stopped and thought whether we should, right? And that's really what the premise of this book is about. AI has a number of implications for, human society, but, are all of them good? And then finally, One Day Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. Yes. And I think that we are in a moment where, far too often we look back and wonder if we did well. I think we can actually stay here and say, are we doing good right now? And is there a pivot point that we can make? I think this is a departure from all of his other pieces. I think that is an important thing to say, but it is an analysis about Israel's assault on Palestine and how, again, that moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. One day everyone's going to say that this was always an atrocity.
And Shawn, what are your endorsements?
My endorsement that ties in to today's, to the Orwell part of things is, I've actually endorsed this before, but it's just applicable here. It's a novel called We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. It's a 1921 dystopian sci-fi novel, sort of about a world where everyone is sort of, your life is sort of this mathematical equation, and you have to live within those standards. And there's this one character you're introduced to who is sort of starting to break out of that mathematical equation and start to have individuality, and it's but he knows he's not supposed to, and it's just a really interesting way. It actually ties into both of these things really well. Other thing I wanted to endorse was both the Raoul Peck things I would endorse, and then finally, I recently listened to the audiobook of this novel, All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker, read by Eduardo Ballerini, one of the great audiobook readers. And it's an incredible thriller, mystery thriller, coming-of-age story set in 1970s Missouri about this kid who witnesses kidnapping happening, and he goes to stop it, and then he ends up getting kidnapped. And then it's about his friend trying to find him, and it spans about 40 years. And it's just... This book tore my heart apart and put it back together a million times. It's just put my heart in a taffy pulling machine. And it's just one of the best books I've read all year. So yeah, check that out.
And then I'm going to endorse connected to both PLUR1BUS and Orwell, Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, which has such a good description of what it is to take a concept or a word and pretend that it can mean anything that it's convenient to you for it to mean. Yes. Really all of Naomi Klein's work, but especially Doppelganger. Yes. And also the album Everybody Scream by Florence and the Machine, which came out a couple weeks ago, and I really like it, and I think that everybody should scream. So
Scream Club.
yeah, Scream Club.
Why can't I say that?
Hive Mind Scream Club. Scream Club. Yeah. Yes.
I'll let you know when it starts, but you'll just know.
I'll just know. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I appreciate you bearing with me through my first time ever doing this.
Yay, Lindsay, it's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we all be laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh yeah, talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah.